Full-time rational perspective on Chelsea 3, Newcastle 2. A huge win for Pochettino, a huge win for Chelsea at Stamford Bridge tonight to effectively keep any hope of European football alive, and especially going into a run over the next few weeks where Chelsea are playing a lot at Stamford Bridge, where actually this year their form at Stamford Bridge has got a little bit better. So it's a positive night, it really is. And there was the classic Chelsea shooting themselves in the foot just before half time. There were those kind of lapses in concentration, those lapses and dips in performance that have been present throughout this season. But I've got to give it to the players, Pochettino. I think they could have seen that game go in a very negative direction, and then also having to cling on. Not actually cling on, I mean, that's kind of unfair because Newcastle didn't put that much pressure on in added time, but the way they dealt with added time, we've seen Chelsea be very panicky in those sort of situations against worse teams to try and cling on to a lead, and I thought the way they dealt with added time was good as well. So this is a big win, and I really do hope that it starts what should be and has to be a really positive end to the season, because you know, since the Brentford game, a lot of the feeling around the club is what it has been for a while. And one result doesn't change that. One result isn't going to completely turn everything around. But one result, at the very least, gives us something to smile about, which is always lovely. And I think there are some players tonight who obviously deserve a lot of praise. And some of those are quite obvious, ones that I've been giving praise to all season. Others, not so much. And I think it's lovely when those who haven't been getting that much praise get praise and they step up and they perform, because I want every Chelsea player to perform. I want to sit here and give praise all day to every single player who puts on a shirt for this club, because that's what, you know, being a supporter is. And I think that tonight there was a lot more good than bad, obviously. And you know, the starting 11 I thought was always going to be curious, because obviously the injuries to Ben Chilwell and Levi Colwill prompted questions over what that defence would look like. I wasn't too surprised that Mykhailo came back into the starting lineup, and you had Chalobah and Axel Disasi as a back two. I think that actually, and of course it's easier to say this in hindsight, but you know, you could have seen a scenario there where he stuck with a back three and brought Thiago Silva in. But I think in the end it worked that Chelsea stuck with a back four. They look a lot more natural under Pochettino playing that system. And I don't really want to see us move to a back three if it's just going to, you know, limit our attacking expression and options up front. You know, I think if you're going to play that system, you have to play it properly and you have to be committed to it, rather than just kind of very short term, we're just reacting and going to play a back three now because of X opponent, you know, X situation. So Chelsea started really well, and again, it's, you know, that combination of Cole Palmer and Nicolas Jackson, two of Chelsea's most productive players this season. I thought it was really clever by Nicolas Jackson, just inside the box, really clever kind of movement and technique in finding tight spaces that, funny enough, we saw glimpses of during pre-season. But, you know, 2-2 for him in the Premier League. And again, it's another goal on his tally for this season. I think he absolutely run himself into the ground tonight, because Chelsea don't really have another centre-forward option, especially with Nkunku out injured at the moment. But a big moment for him once again, just to add another goal to his tally this season. And I thought some of the runs he made in behind, just, you know, Chelsea consistently looked like a dangerous team. And I thought, from a tactical point of view, I thought the way Chelsea dealt with Newcastle's very high press and the way they especially targeted. It's not that surprising we look down our right side, because Malo Gusto has proved to be a really effective player for Chelsea, a creator too, but then also Cole Palmer. But I think the way they really isolated Dan Burn in that first half was really effective, and it caused Newcastle a lot of problems, and it felt like the team was very sharp, very alert to Newcastle's way of pressing, very energetic team, even without some of their big players. And I sort of was looking at the game and right, Chelsea weren't amazing. They weren't creating a flurry of opportunities, but it felt like they were keeping Newcastle at an arm's length, and we're dealing with the situation in a measured fashion. And that's what I wanted to see from Chelsea. But the problem is with this Chelsea team is they do have these massively baffling, but it can't really be unsurprising at this point, lapses in concentration where they just shoot themselves in the foot inexplicably. And this was another moment of that really that led to the Newcastle equaliser before half time. And, it starts from just an inability to clear the ball. I think it was Enzo Fernandez who'd given the ball away in that sequence as well. Malo Gusto, I think, is kind of most guilty in this sequence because he decides to start doing a keepy-uppy competition. We know his technique is good, but there's a time and a place for that. Chalobah has a chance to head it away. He heads it right back into danger. So all round, collectively, it was just an awful moment, and it completely undermined the sort of 40 or 41 minutes that had come before that, where Chelsea had actually looked quite solid and promising against Newcastle. And, Isak gets that space, and he's a brilliant centre forward, and you give him that sort of space, and he absolutely places it perfectly into the bottom corner, and Petrovic can't get anything to it. And, you go into half-time and Chelsea start to look a little bit rattled. And there's always that concern recently, especially Chelsea. We've spoken about this a lot in post-match reviews, where Chelsea's inability post half-time. What happens in the interval? Why do Chelsea look so flat? We've seen this a number of times in recent weeks. Leeds, Brentford, the extra time against Liverpool. Tonight, I was slightly concerned. The start of the second half, we saw similar. Newcastle did have a couple of dangerous moments that I think their quality from set pieces, even without Kieran Trippier on the pitch, can still be dangerous, whether that's Jacob Murphy, who went on to score a brilliant goal later on in the half. They could have made more than that. But actually, I think Chelsea quickly steadied the ship and started to press Newcastle back again. And it always, as it has for most of this season, come through Cole Palmer, right? I mean, I heard some absolutely farcical stuff last week when people were talking about, and I think it's a fair analysis to have, but then I think there is the context of, especially under Pochettino, when we talk about, what player has improved under Pochettino, what player has regressed. The issue this season compared to last season is this is mostly a new squad. A lot of this is a new squad. So it's very hard for me personally to honestly look at a player from a Chelsea fan perspective and watching them in their Chelsea careers, when this is literally, for a lot of them, their first year at Chelsea, and saying whether they've regressed or not. I guess, yeah, you can do it over the course of a season. But then when I heard that Cole Palmer had regressed, it's just laughable, right? This is a guy who is contributing directly to goals, whether creating or scoring himself. He's a game changer. He creates opportunities. He did, even before the goal, put a brilliant ball across the box that was begging to be finished. And he just takes the ball. I think it was a pass into the feet of really aimed at Nicolas Jackson, but the way Palmer just took that ball outside the box and just rifled it into the bottom corner, that level of instinct and just aggression from a Chelsea player in and around the box is something that we don't see of. I love to see it from Chelsea players, because I don't think we get enough of it, where a player sometimes will take a risk. I mean, it wasn't the most extraordinary goal we've ever seen, but there was an instinct maybe there to play a safer pass, but he goes instantly for the shot. Dubravka isn't ready for it, and it puts Chelsea back in front. And Cole Palmer, I believe that's 11 or 12 goals for him this season in the Premier League. An extraordinary signing. He has made a real difference to Chelsea this season, and despite all the miserable kind of analysis and the way we felt about the club generally, he is a ray of light, and he is consistently. He is someone I love watching, and there's just no two ways about it. He makes Chelsea a better team. He looks like an absolute gem. I mean, you consider what we've spent on other players. He only cost us £40 million. I mean, it's just absolutely farcical, this market, for that type of player. So really a gem, and of course made a massive difference to Chelsea tonight. But then I was really interested to see how Chelsea would cope with this kind of situation, because we've seen them in different moments this season be unable to, whether it's hold a lead or just deal with situations like this. And I thought, from Pochettino's point of view, how is he going to deal with this situation? Because then you have a Newcastle side who, of course, Anthony Gordon's been taken off in the first half. They aren't at their best, but they are a team that are going to start to press you. We're going to start to look for set pieces. They're going to try and put you under pressure. But then it's how, as a coach, do you counteract that? How do you try and get a goal on the break? There's no getting around it. I mean, for me, it should have been a 3-1 way earlier than it was. Raheem Sterling having another classic moment where he literally straight after the second goal, where Newcastle pressed up, Chelsea find their way behind them. Sterling manages to get the ball under control. Palmer's right there. It's what we've seen earlier in the season, where he should have laid in either Palmer or Jackson. It's really costly, and it nearly was for Chelsea tonight. And I just, Chelsea got away with it tonight, but in other situations we haven't. And for Sterling, and it's funny how football works, parallels and kind of irony of who he was replaced by on the subs bench, and then what that player did in a one-on-one situation. if I'm looking for Raheem Sterling and what do I want from Raheem Sterling at this stage of his career, it's to manage moments like that expertly, because he has years and years of experience of doing that. And unfortunately, this season he hasn't been one of those players. So I started to worry that hit writing on the wall. We're going to look back at that moment as the one where we could have killed off the game, but we didn't. Now, there wasn't, again, Newcastle didn't create a lot. I think, the frustration maybe from Pochettino's point of view as a player like, Isak, who's such a dangerous forward, was pretty well isolated and marshalled by the back two. I know he scored, but really other than that moment, he wasn't getting into the box and getting looks at goal that consistently. Again, I think Newcastle were very limited by their injuries. The usual width that you get from Gordon and Almiron didn't have as good of a game. The central midfielders didn't get into the box as much as they usually like to. Trippier, of course, is a regular source of threat from set pieces. They didn't have that. So their kind of natural outlets to try and hurt teams kind of weren't there tonight. But then you bring on Mykhailo Mudryk, and I tweeted, I'm not going to say I told you so, because I just tweeted that I felt that one day, and I felt this for over a year now, that Mudryk with his speed, it's kind of if there's one situation and scenario, even with a raw player like him, that he is kind of Amazon Prime to impact. It's when you're holding on to a lead and you have a team that's pressing up. And I felt just one of these days, Mudryk is going to score a goal on transition, because it just felt kind of natural that he'd do that, right? But it wasn't just a simple, one-on-one. The ball's been played over a high line and he's just, it was still a congested area. And he took a lot of responsibility, because Conor Gallagher had the ball. It had come from Jackson out wide, and he just takes the ball off of Gallagher and he just takes responsibility. And the composure of a player who I've criticised for such a lack of technique at times, decision making, being so raw, being so erratic, the composure to not panic in that moment, take it around the goalkeeper and finish it and effectively win the game for Chelsea is amazing for Mudryk. And, this is a guy who has received a lot of criticism from myself, from others. And when we look at the actual evidence of the past few weeks, he starts and scores an important goal against Leeds. That was a very impressive finish. And he had some good moments in that game. And he's come off the bench here and scored a vital goal for Chelsea that's won the points. And, I do think it's now on Pochettino when you compare him to, say, Raheem Sterling. Why can't Mudryk be starting against Leicester? And I know he is an absolute threat. Tactically, I understand why you'd want to have him as a sub. It's kind of like the Pulisic effect off the bench. But at some point, I think that, Mudryk will turn around and go, how am I ever going to develop if I don't play after I score? And all I'm asking from Mudryk, like I ask for any Chelsea player, is output, right? And evidence that you are improving, evidence that you justify to start on a regular basis. And what Mudryk has done in the past 2 weeks, for me, justifies more minutes. And I'm never ashamed to say I'm wrong on a player. We need to see it more consistently. But that was a big moment for him in the Premier League at Stamford Bridge. And, it was a shame, really, that last 6 minutes was so tense and nervy, because I thought, again, Chelsea had pretty much dealt with Newcastle in a good way, and it's just it's a loose ball. I think maybe Cucurella can do better. It leads to Murphy, who scores an absolute worldie. I mean, I just it's hard sometimes to kind of I want to kind of microanalyze that moment, but he probably isn't scoring a goal with that venom into the top corner, and it hits you literally top corner. And I know we have a go at Kepa a lot of the times in the past, and maybe some people think I'm having double standards here with Petrovic, but generally you watch that goal. I mean, that's one of the fastest shots I've ever seen. He absolutely rifles it. But again, it would have been easy for Chelsea and predictable for Chelsea to collapse at that moment and to freak out in that situation, but they didn't. I thought they handled the situation well, handled the pressure well, limited Newcastle to very little, and we come away with the points. Now, I do believe that if you look at the run of fixtures, the way the games are played out, Chelsea, of course, have the FA Cup next weekend, that we kind of have the situation for Conference League or Europa League in our hands. I mean, that's easier said than done, and we have still got some very tricky games coming up. But if you look at the next run of games now, that's what I was looking at earlier before this game happened, that, I think Chelsea should be aiming for 4 wins. Now, I know over the past year, this season, it's very unrealistic to expect Chelsea to win 4 games in a row. But you look at the inconsistency of the teams above us, who have kept on dropping points inexplicably at times. And you do think if Chelsea and anyone puts a run of wins together like Aston Villa did at this time last year, it can shoot you up the table. And I look at, we've got Burnley coming up at Stamford Bridge. We have got, I believe it's Man United, Everton. There may be Sheffield United in there as well. We've got a run of games over the next month or so where points simply have to be picked up by Chelsea. We have to finally beat Man United. We have to put away teams like Everton and Burnley at Stamford Bridge. And what happens after that, I'm not sure. But at the very least, it will give a sense of urgency and actual direction to the end of this season, and a real sense that, yeah, sure, it is slightly better than last year, and maybe European football is there for us. And of course, Sunday is massive against Leicester. So those are my thoughts. Man of the match, it's got to be, of course, Cole Palmer. I mean, there's a lot of me emotionally that wants to give some flowers to Mudryk, which I think we do. But Palmer is such an extraordinary talent. I mean, he really is such a wonderful player to behold, and someone who is at such a level at times you kind of feel that he's kind of harshly done by playing for this Chelsea team, and it sort of shows the levels, right? But he makes a real difference, and I think if you just focus on Cole Palmer, you can see a brighter future for Chelsea, and I guess that's something you can cling on to and feel positive about. But Chelsea have won, so we're always going to be happy. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.